Howdy everyone, this is going to be more of a run and gun video than what I normally do. The goal here is to talk a little bit about a setup for video casting and such, particularly with all the SANS folks right now moving to CyberCasts. So I'm going to talk through a couple setups that you might want to consider. I'm going to start with a highly advanced one, essentially what I'm using here, with some swap-ins, and then I'm going to go down step by step by step until you find something that maybe works with exactly whatever your needs are or what goal and quality you're looking for. So in this case, we're filming on a DSLR style camera. That's something like this one right here. These cameras all have interchangeable lenses, so you can take them apart. And that lens is really going to determine what your look is as far as the video picture goes. But when it comes to something like this, the most important thing isn't video, it is absolutely audio. And so the best style of audio you may want to consider is a condenser microphone. Condenser microphones are going to give you that podcast style vibe and will provide by far the best audio. An example of one of those is this one I have back here. If we're talking about top of the line condenser microphones, the ideal tends to be the Shure SM7B. I don't personally have that microphone, but it's on my list of things to get at some point, who knows when. When you drop down from that, you get into things like the Blue Yeti microphone, or what I have back there, which is the Razer Siren X. The thing about these microphones, though, is that when you're speaking into them, you really have to speak onto them. It's almost like eating an ice cream cone. Treat the microphone like that. That's one of the reasons why you need to have one of those pop filters so that you don't get the sounds and clicks and such into the microphone. It does mean that if you're teaching for a long period of time, say a full day, you have to be on that microphone the entire time, which may or may not be the most convenient thing. The next option of microphone style is what I'm talking into right now. This is actually a Rode NTG4 Plus, which is a shotgun microphone. There are a number of different types of shotgun microphones out there, and styles and quality and all this stuff. I find them to be the most convenient with good sound quality. This, for example, is a Rode Go. I do not recommend this microphone. I'll talk about why in a moment. But it is a shotgun microphone. An alternative example of that here is the Deity microphone that I have. If you're talking in a studio where there is not a large amount of ambient sound and noise, you do not need the windsock, and I do recommend taking it off. You'll get a better sound without it. This microphone is really, really good. It's the VMic D3 Pro. Rode has come up with an equivalent very recently that's a little bit more expensive, but it actually acts as its own audio interface. So you can plug the USB 3 port here directly into your computer, and your computer will read it just like it would a standard microphone. For something like this, I would imagine that the confluence of both convenience and ease of use would be that Rode mic here, which sounds very similar to this one. I think the Rode mic has a little bit more of a full sound, but I've had this one for a bit, so I'm not swapping out. The NTG4 Plus that I have up here, though, is a more studio quality shotgun microphone. You'd see these used you do see these used in Hollywood productions, though these are the very lower end of shotgun mics that you would see there. Problem is, they are XLR microphones, which means that you need to have some kind of audio interface to connect them to your computer. This here is a Zoom H4n, which does work for this, but you also have direct computer ones like this one here. Both of these do support USB, and you can plug them directly into your computer. Do note when using an audio interface that with XLR, it's pure audio, which means you've got a waveform. With a waveform, it means you have attenuation of the signal over time, and you have noise as well. Your audio interface will contribute noise to the signal, so if you have a cheap one, this is a fairly cheap one. This one's relatively okay, but if you have a cheap one, you'd expect to get a little bit more noise on that signal as a result of that. That said, they do tend to still be very good, even with a cheap audio interface versus alternative audio sources. The next style of audio to consider, and probably the most convenient one for a circumstance like this, is an lavalier mic. Those are these lapel microphones that you pin on. This here is the Deity Pro Lav, something of the sort. I'll link in the description all of the links on Amazon to each one of these items. This is my favorite lavalier mic. With lavalier mics, you are going to get a more tinny sound as opposed to a less full one. The full sound, of course, is going to be from those condenser microphones. And then you get that podcaster sound. Those are by far my preference, but lavs can be really convenient. You can walk around with one of these, of course, right? Now, when it comes to walking around with one, you have two choices. A stupendously long cable. Nobody really wants to do that. Or wireless audio. You can get really expensive on wireless audio, but I don't know that there's really a huge point to that. This is an example of counterpoint, is the Rode Go system for wireless audio. You plug the lavalier mic into one of these, example of port, and then you plug the computer into the other, or an audio interface. Both should work. And now you have a wireless system with a lav mic that you can clip directly to you. The wireless mic Go also has a microphone here, so you can technically just clip this directly and then get audio that way too. So in a pinch, this also helps out. I'm a very big fan of this system. I don't feel like the audio is as full as you have with, say, a shotgun microphone, let alone a condenser microphone. But it's a lavalier, and I think this is about the best kind of system you'll get for something like that. If you like to walk around while talking, this is my recommendation. I don't think you're going to beat that, at least as far as audio quality goes. Now, that said, there are always cheaper options to something like this. These, the link system here is about $200, and this microphone is about $100. You can get cheaper lavs. Because the lavalier is really close to your body and really close to the sound of your voice, you're likely to get pretty decent results. Even with a fairly inexpensive lavalier, this one's a bit more on the pricey side. Though, of course, everything gets really expensive if you really want to spend the money. Next, what do you want to record into? You can record into an audio interface like this. If you put the money into getting a camera like this, though, be very careful about what you use as the audio source. For example, that shotgun mic that I was not recommending. If you're going to use a camera of this sort to record into, they don't have very good audio interfaces, and you're going to get a lot of noise out of a cheap microphone, which is one of the reasons to get a microphone like this, though lavaliers also do pretty well in this kind of system. Outside of that, you want to record in the computer, perhaps, or some kind of audio interface that's separate. You can get fairly cheap audio interfaces. I believe this one was like 20, 30 bucks. Actually works out okay. It's not the best, but it's just fine. Next, you of course want to test your sound quality as you're preparing to deliver. Just a set of headphones will work for this. Realize that whatever you're listening to is probably not what your listeners are going to be listening on. They might be using just straight computer speakers, or they might be using headphones. If you're using really nice headphones to listen to your audio, it's not going to sound the same as what they hear. That's not necessarily the worst thing, but it's something to be cognizant of. If your audio sounds really bad in cheap headphones, well, your listener might be wearing fairly cheap headphones. Consider that. I'd recommend listening to both. The next thing to consider, if you're using some kind of more advanced system like a camera of this sort, of course, is going to be that lens here. What lens to use. You don't have to go overboard, but be very careful about lenses that are really long and have a long throw distance like this one here. If you're recording inside, this is going to be way too zoomed in. For example, this one's a 70-200. What I'm recording on right now is a 24-270. So if you were using a lens like this one, the farthest away you would get from your subject looks like this, which is pretty close. And I do have the camera a fair bit away, so if you get closer, it's pretty close. On the lens I have right now, you can get as far away as this. In this case, since it's far away enough, you can see some of the studio lighting that I have set up here, which of course brings us to that next point, lighting. When it comes to video quality, the most important thing you can possibly do is lighting. I have in front of me here a big softbox style light as the key light. If I were to get rid of all the other lights and just keep this one, it's actually not too bad. But this light here is really, really important. For example, if we were to lose the light, even the camera setup that I have right now, which is really quite nice, doesn't look particularly good. The light is more important than the camera or the video source. If you're recording off of an iPhone and you've got a good light, it'll look okay. That said, your iPhone camera is a lot better than your computer's camera. I would recommend moving away from something like your built-in webcam inside of your computer. For example, these built-in webcams, they don't generally support over 720p, and they have really, really bad quality and ISO, which means they have to ramp up the brightness, which reduces quality really, really heavily, really, really fast. I don't recommend using your webcam to do some of these films. However, even a phone camera could work. A webcam is okay. If you really want to go crazy, of course, you can go all the way. In this case, we're filming off of an Canon Eos R, which is a mirrorless SLR style camera with a 24 to 70 millimeter lens, which does give you a decent throw distance. This lens here is also quite nice. It is a Sigma 18 to 35, so it's even wider than the lens we're filming off of right now. This lens does have a little bit of a sound though when it tries to focus. If your microphone isn't on top of the camera, like this, then that's not a problem. You won't hear that sound. This microphone, or this camera lens, is used pretty frequently in some very high production stuff. That said, this camera, which was my first one to use for something like this, is a T5i, which is not a particularly good camera, specifically as it relates to the focus. What you'll have with a camera like this one is that the subject, which is you in this case, will fall out of focus all the time. Here you can see my hand is in focus, and now I'm in focus, but that will come in and out of focus fairly frequently just because the focus on this camera isn't particularly good. It's actually the whole reason I replaced it with that one. That said, most modern cameras these days, of the SLR sort, do have pretty decent focus. They don't actually spend a lot of time hunting. They're really not that bad. The one that I have right now from a purpose like this is a bit overkill. Now again, this is a camera, which means it generally records to something like a SD card, so you can't use it for streaming. But it can output HDMI, so you need to have some kind of HDMI capture card to put into your computer. This one right here is by Elgato. Works pretty well for me. It's called CamLink. This just USB straights into your computer, and your computer perceives this like a webcam. You take the HDMI output from your camera and you put it directly into that. Now, of course, if you would like to avoid all of that complexity, a webcam does work. Do realize the closer webcam is to your face, the better, and the better your lighting is, also the better. There are two webcams that I would recommend. One is the Logitech 922, I believe it is, and the other one is the Razer Rio. I'd recommend the Razer Rio over the other two for one reason. The Razer Rio is a webcam with a light around it, and again, lighting is far more important than anything else, including the camera itself, when you're recording video. If you've got good lighting, then your video is going to be okay. If you've got good lighting and a great camera, your video is going to be a little bit better. But it's really that lighting that matters more than the camera itself does. With an exception, webcams built into computers are really, really bad. Next piece of the setup that I have here, you might notice the colors are really, really good. Some of that actually comes from the camera. Better cameras tends to be pretty decent at making good colors. However, I'm also recording into an external recorder here. I generally use that because it's really handy for me in YouTube, insofar as I can record onto a hard drive and I can get a bigger recording, and if you're recording really large file formats, that's handy. But in the case of streaming, it's got an extra bit of value. Here I'm using what's called a LUT, or a lookup table, and it's automatically pushing that into the stream as it goes across. It's kind of like doing post-production, but in real time. The same thing's true about audio, which I'll talk about here in just a second. Let's take a look at what the video would look like without that LUT. And as you can see here, it's a lot different. And of course you can change a couple of these things in your camera itself. Here I'm just turned off the LUT directly, but you can tell this is a lot more vibrant. Now that said, a external recorder is not something that's required for this. It's not something that you would need. but it does provide some nifty little advantages here. When it comes to post-processing in real time, though, audio is also the second part of that equation. You might use, and I tend to, something called OBS, Open Broadcast Software. With that, you can actually put an EQ on the audio feed in real time. If I'm doing a YouTube video, I won't bother. I'll do that actually in post-production on the computer after recording the video. However, you can do it in real time using something like OBS. If you use OBS, it can also look at the feed and call that the webcam, which is quite nice. That said, this is a secondary OBS plugin, and it works not on Mac, which is what I'm looking at right now, but Windows does have support for that, so you may want to consider the computers. When it comes to SANS, we're using GoToMeeting to do a lot of this. GoToMeeting doesn't work very well on Linux. It works better on Mac, but if you want any of those features like the ability with OBS to use a third-party plugin to make this whole setup feel like a single webcam, then, well, Windows is your best bet. You can, however, use multiple different systems together while doing something like this. I, for example, use a Chromebook as well. And with that Chromebook, I will generally put something like, say for example, later on today I want to do a video on ethics and cybersecurity related to COVID-19, because that's kind of becoming a big topic right now. But that's a bit more of a serious video, so I would want to make sure that my diction and exactly what I'm saying is very precise. So I'll put a script here on that, and I can actually see the script and reference information external to the actual feed in order to make the video a little bit more accurate and direct. To control something of this sort, To control something of this sort, you might use something like an iPad as well. This works just fine. And you can connect it to the same kind of feed and then use this to share and send information, maybe communicate externally if you absolutely need to. Now let's talk about cheaper options for all of this stuff. But when it comes to lighting, if you don't want to use big light panels like these, you can use something smaller. This is a light that I use generally for on-the-go style work. It's very small, and it is quite bright. Look at this. It's also RGB, so you can change the color signs on it. Both the color temperature you can change, and you can also change the color itself. To any kind of RGB if you would like to. As you can tell, it's really changing the color of my face here because it's really, really quite bright. So as a portable light that doesn't take a lot of resources to use, I like this one a lot. It's a really, really solid light. Plus it comes with a nice little case. Next on the cheaper side, again, the webcams, that Logitech one and the Razer one, they work really fantastic. Next on audio options on the cheaper side, I would recommend something like what I have right here. This is the Razer Siren X. Not a particularly expensive microphone, a little bit cheaper than the Blue Yeti, and I personally prefer the sound out of this over the Blue Yeti if you're going to go on the condenser microphone side. If you want to go with shotgun microphones, again, I do recommend on the cheaper side that Rode mic, though that Rode mic is not the cheapest of microphones. Though if you're going to go for a cheaper style microphone, I wouldn't go cheaper than that on the shotgun microphone side. Shotgun microphones do tend to be pretty high quality and also high price. On the lavalier side, if you do not want to go wireless, you can actually go quite cheap as well. Most lavaliers don't cost a huge amount of money. You just pin them in right here, and you plug this into whatever your source is. If you're staying seated, that source doesn't necessarily need to be very far away. It's your computer, so you can make that work on a very, very slight budget. If you buy an audio interface like this is what we call a field recorder. Field recorders come with a microphone as well, and these microphones tend to be pretty darn good. These microphones also have a jack for a lav, if you would like to plug them into a lavalier like this. And a lot of them also have a USB interface as well, as here's the H4n. If you're going to use a webcam, the key trick there is don't use the one built into your computer and put the webcam as close to your face as possible. If you're using cheaper or less powerful lighting, get that lighting as close to your face as you can as well. It's the rule of inverse square law, I believe it is. The drop-off of lighting over distance. The closer it is, the better you're going to get. If you see those pictures that are people with like a full black background behind them, it's not because they're taking the picture in a dark room. It's because of the inverse square law. The light is right in front of them, and light drops off really, really quickly before it hits the backdrop. And so you get a full black background there. That's, like, conversely what that means is the closer the light is to your face, the better your lighting is going to be, even if your lighting's bad. There are some caveats on lighting, though. I've got a ceiling light up here that is not turned on. If you've got lighting that's directly above you, it's going to put shadows down on your eyes, and you'll look like a raccoon. Not the best look. If you got the lighting behind you, your back is going to be lit up pretty well, but your face is going to be really dark, and it's very difficult to see. So lighting in front of you and in your direction tends to be the best. And then you can do, of course, a key light plus a couple other lights if you would really like to, but that key light is the most important piece. Oh, and of course, make sure you have your Open Security brand hand sanitizer, because we live in different times. I think that's all I got. Feel free to ask me questions if you got any. Again, this was a very quick video. I'm really not paying attention to the details, but this is a setup that I use, and hopefully it'll help you when selecting what setup you would like to use. One last thing. With strong lights, you want strong diffusion, because otherwise it's going to be too harsh. Something like this. Very cheap, easy to come by. And it'll take any harsh light, like a light panel like we have up here, and it'll make it viable for your specific use case. Just put the two between each other. Use paper clips if you really need to. But if we were talking about a cheap way to get decent lighting, a bright light panel with some kind of diffusion will help you out. And it'll keep you from looking a bit like this. Until next time. Have a good one, and good luck. Ouch! Come here! No! No, come here! Oh! You got in the way of the light panel. Yeah, you did, you little boy.